Hello and welcome back to Ask the Expert. I'm your host, Zach Hunsinger, and we are joined by Ana Karen Flores, a senior research analyst at Safer Foundation and one of my esteemed colleagues. She's going to walk us through her insights from the 2023 report by the Prison Policy Initiative, a report that unveils the harsh realities faced by incarcerated women in our country. So Ana, what is this report and what is it about?
Hello. Well, I'd like to start off by thanking you, Zach, for having me on this live stream to discuss a topic that, while I don't consider myself an expert in, it's a topic that I'm very much interested in, and it is a personal one. So as you mentioned in the introduction, this report really answers questions about why and where women are incarcerated, especially the alarming rise of women's incarceration rates and the limited data that exists. It also details how women's experiences with the criminal justice system and incarceration are different from the experiences of men.
Interesting. So the experiences are different by men. Why? What makes that happen?
So I don't know if you
aren't all people treated
we actually
equal?
Do have some questions related to that a little bit further down.
Okay, all right. So I'm going off script and I'm already messing stuff up. Fair enough. My production manager is gonna be like, Zach, just stick to the what's there. All right. So Ana, what are the most striking trends or disparities revealed by the report? What stood out to you?
So let's start off with the fact that there are just under 173,000 women and girls who are incarcerated in the United States. And that rate has been growing at a faster pace than the men's incarceration rates. And women are disproportionately located in jails. That was definitely a surprise for me. The report...
I interrupt you again. This is what I was telling you. I was like, I'm gonna jump in there. I'm not gonna let you I'm gonna be a hot bench. Just how's the disparity determined? You said they are disproportionately represented. So, I mean, isn't the population about 50-50, like what, 48-52 or something? So you're saying 60% of the population that are incarcerated are women? How does this play out? What does that mean?
So there, in terms of incarceration rates, the rate for women is just going at a higher pace than that of men.
So it's growing faster.
So it's growing, like I mentioned, at an alarming pace, and it's specifically in jails. And the report really highlights how jails can be especially deadly for women because jails are supposed to be for a shorter term. And so what they mentioned, and this is a little bit of a trigger warning, is that they have a higher mortality rate, and an increased suicide rate in jails because they're poorly positioned to provide the proper health care and support for women. It also touches on the fact that it's difficult for families to stay in touch while women are in jail, and an estimated 80% of women in jails are mothers.
Wait, you said 80?
Mm-hmm.
Like how old are their kids? I mean, are they still supposed to be rearing children?
So I think that later on in the report, it mentions that they are about 58% of them have minor children.
Wow. Well, who's taking care of the kids?
So oftentimes this ends up being a family member if they have family who'd be willing to take in their children. Unfortunately, sometimes children end up being in foster care. So it really depends on the kinds of supports that the woman has in her life.
Well, I'm way off script here. What are the common crimes? I mean, you're painting a picture that sounds like we're putting women behind for petty offenses that's going to just cause a much worse situation for society as a whole. If I mean, we know with ACEs, the child gets taken away from the mothers and in foster care. Like, it seems like we're just creating a cycle or a wheel that will perpetually cause the same problems over and over.
Absolutely, yeah. And to your point, especially compared to men, most of these crimes are not violent crimes. I forgot to write down the quote, but I believe oftentimes they are drug abuse related, property crimes were, I believe, the two that were the most common.
I think I found it right here. We got women are proportionally more likely to be serving a sentence for property or drug offense and less likely incarcerated for violent offenses when compared to men.
That's right.
Wow. So we as a society, well, I mean, maybe it's not even society. I say that like we can make a difference here, but I don't know. Maybe we can't. Like it sounds like we're unintentionally having people. We're just like, I mean, what am I supposed to do here? I don't like this. I don't like it. What am I going to do? But how do I change? Like, so what? What do I do?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest suggestions that came out of this report is investing and supporting community-based organizations who are supporting families, who are supporting women, because another finding is that so many women were already experiencing barriers pre-incarceration, while incarceration, and then post in release. So it's providing these support, these resources to women and try and get ahead of the curve, and making sure that their family's supporting, because as we've discussed up to this point, so many of these women, majority of these women, their incarceration not only impacts them, but it impacts their children,
affects society, affects everybody,
in their communities.
The systems analysis of me is coming out here. The systems theory of social work. I just don't see how this is good in any way.
The other thing that I wanted to highlight, Zach, before I forgot, in terms of some of the trends and disparities that were revealed in the report, is that there is a section earlier on about the COVID-19 pandemic. And the pandemic did lead to significant reductions in both women rates and jail rates. But unfortunately, a lot of what this was due to was pandemic-related slowdowns. So courts being closed, trying not to house as many people in these small spaces. And now the jail populations have already begun to rebound to pre-pandemic levels. So it was short-lived.
Wow. Okay, so the disparities are terrible.
Yes.
You've convinced me. Well done. And then we started to talk about some of the various factors contributing to the high rates of women's incarceration. So how do these systems intersect with gender, race, and other demographic factors? And what are the implications for women within the criminal system?
Yeah, so the report cited a survey that was published by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. And what's neat about this survey is that it's an in-depth look at the backgrounds and experiences of people in prison. And these were their responses. What they found is that women reported childhood disadvantages. So what I was discussing earlier in terms of women were already facing a number of challenges before they were incarcerated, including homelessness, including themselves being a part of foster care. Several women also mentioned or reported having disabilities and physical and mental health problems at higher rates, which of course then are unfortunately worsened when they're in prison, jail, because they're not getting the support that they need, the medication that they need, the counseling. And so
it's been pretty well documented. Prison is traumatizing.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think there's any way around that. But so I'm flipping through this. I showed this already, but here's, I think, what you're summarizing for us.
Yep.
And what immediately stood out to me was that women are more likely than men to have already had a high school diploma or equivalent, but still over half did not. So it's still not great. But I think the common idea is that, these are stupid people who don't know any better, and that's why they're going to
Mm-hmm.
prison. But that's not, the trend is going the other direction, that it's
Yeah.
people with high school degrees.
Mm-hmm.
It's still not over half, but that's the
That's a
direction
good
it's
amount.
going.
Yeah.
We have homelessness,
Mm-hmm. Not employed.
joblessness,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and the disabilities and mental health you just mentioned. But the 3/4 before they went, again, above men. So this is just, men get all the attention. I don't know what else to say here. It doesn't seem to
Mm-hmm.
make sense that we're not focusing on the male, or excuse me, the female part of here. Why are we not getting more attention on where it needs to be on women?
Yeah, and to that point, Zach, I think that um, the report also mentioned there is limited data. So we only know about these experiences from women's telling their story, sharing those experiences with us, but it needs to be better documented. Absolutely.
Well, telling the story is a trigger word for me. I previously, in another life, um, trained military sexual assault victim advocates,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of a unique situation where more men in the military are, by gross number, assaulted than women, but women are disproportionately assaulted. It's just that 1% of men is total number greater than 60% of women. I
Yeah.
don't remember the number itself, but in any event, the only reason it was coming to light when this happened 10, 12 years ago when I was doing this was because women were telling their story. We led a
Mm-hmm.
campaign that that was it. That's all we wanted people to do, was to come forward and tell their story. We didn't want to change a law. We didn't want to get anyone
Mm-hmm.
in trouble. That was it. You need to share your story,
Yeah.
because until you start doing that, these things are going to continue being under the rug, and that is not acceptable. We have
Mm-hmm.
to encourage people to speak up in safe environments.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, tell me, can you elaborate on the ripple effects of women's imprisonment, particularly regarding the well-being of children, caregiving responsibilities, and the perpetuation of intergenerational cycles of incarceration?
Yeah, so we've already touched on this a little bit. We mentioned that women are more likely to be parents and parents of minor children. They're more likely to be single parents and be living with their children prior to incarceration, making it more likely that incarceration would uproot their children and lead to the termination of parental rights, really having that breakdown of the family. And this not only impacts the woman herself, but it has lasting effects on children's behavioral and mental health. Um, and this is where I'll steer off script a little bit, similar to what you just said, Zach, about storytelling and sharing your experiences. Um, and I mentioned earlier on that this is a topic that's especially I'm passionate about and personal to me because my parents were incarcerated and eventually deported. And oftentimes I think of my story of one about immigration. And
Yes.
so it doesn't feel like it's both the criminal justice system and immigration, because immigration just feels like a larger umbrella, if that makes sense. But the reality is that I am the daughter of parents who were incarcerated. And so I know how important these strategies for supporting families and loved ones are for individuals. I haven't mentioned this yet, but I know that in the report, it cites how difficult it can be for families to stay in touch, stay in communication, because phone calls are just so expensive. Um, they are, there are not as many, you can't do as many visits. Sometimes they don't have enough money to send letters. And so I was just thinking back on the phone calls that we would have with my parents. They were often very short phone calls. You only had a limited amount of time. And so often those were surface level conversations. How are you? How's school? Are you behaving? And so on. And so that doesn't allow for that bond to continue to be there. I also dug up a couple of the letters and drawings that my parents used to send. And I feel like others could relate to this because oftentimes, I don't know if you'll be able to see them, it was a teddy bear for my birthday.
Yeah, I see
or
that. Oh my gosh.
or like precious moments.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then this Tweety Bird one that I kept all these years.
Oh my gracious.
But it's so important to support the family, support their bond, and helping them heal and build that relationship with one another.
Well, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to that, but the phone call thing, the inability to establish bonds because at surface level is spot on. And the other difficulty I think people kind of forget is maybe things are a little different now if you're able to get an iPad and do some FaceTime and stuff, but I still don't think that's super common. But when I represented people who are incarcerated, like as their attorney, I expected like, you will give me your time when I am available because my time is more valuable than yours as the attorney. That was the thought. That's not how it goes at all. In fact, they say, we will call you between the hours of 12 and 3, and hopefully you're available, Mr. Attorney, when we call, because if not, you can wait till next week to get that call. So it's like, I don't know if you've ever scheduled like when the internet provider is supposed to come out or like it just
this window that
it is, you don't know, can I go to the bathroom? Like if I'm in the bath, like where you go, like it's just not convenient and it's really impractical. Is an unfortunate reality. So what are some effective strategies for supporting impacted families and mitigating these negative consequences?
Yeah, so I would say one of the first ones is really trying to provide affordable and accessible communication options. So those costs of phone calls not being as high as they are, allowing more frequent visits. Or another one that I can think of that I didn't mention earlier is for us, the jail that my parents were being housed at was an hour away. And so unless one of my relatives was available, we wouldn't be able to visit because it's an hour away.
You weren't going to hop on the Metro and head over.
Yeah, Metro in Central Illinois.
Yeah, not happening.
And so for other families, it's even further. There may only be one jail or prison for women, and it may be on the other side of the state. And so finding more ways to find transportation to have those visits with family and loved ones. I know that's a strategy that's more for the immediate needs of family members. The other big one, of course, is always working to advocate and try and change policies so that families are.
That's what I thought you were going to say. You came out with phone calls and transportation. I was like, no, what are you talking about? We got to change the system.
It's both. You have to do both at the same time because some of these people are going through this right now. So how do we make the situation better for them? But also thinking higher level, how do we make sure to prevent incarceration from even happening so that these families aren't separated?
Well said. You're so right. I feel the beginnings of a much more lengthy conversation and advocacy efforts here on behalf of Safer Foundation and other organizations. But is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience before we leave today?
Yeah, so I wanted to lift up and encourage our viewers to connect with some of the community-based organizations and individuals that I consider experts in women's incarceration and family reunification. One of those people being Avalon Gaston-Betts, who is the project manager of Illinois Alliance for Reentry and Justice. And for anyone who may not be familiar, this is a statewide coalition of impacted individuals, advocates, service providers, all working on reentry in Illinois. And then the second person that I wanted to mention is Celia Colon, who I recently had the pleasure of meeting in person. This is someone that I admired and heard of. And she is the founder and chief executive of Giving Others Dreams, GOD Inc. And so the last thing that I'll mention is that I'm excited to be joining both of them, as well as a larger group of women in April. We'll actually be marching for an end to incarceration for women and girls. It's called the Free Her March and Rally, if anyone is interested.
Where is this? Are you going to Springfield? Is it
Oh,
Chicago,
sorry.
DC?
DC, yes. We'll be marching in DC. And then finally, of course, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to discuss the report, highlight some of the barriers that women face leading up to incarceration, during and after, and as well as allowing me to share a little bit of my story.
Well, thank you. It's powerful stuff. And I want to, if I may, kindly admonish you, because I think many people have the same thought about when you said, I'm not an expert on this. And I completely disagree. We're always going to be harder on ourselves than others. But you know more about this than 99% of the rest of the world. And you got to take and accept that and continue doing these awesome things like these marches, because if we don't do anything, what's going to change, right? So you gotta open up that window, you gotta stick your head out, and you gotta scream, I'm mad and I'm going to do something about it. So I think this march is an awesome plan. I think that's going to be cool. I look forward to hearing more about it. But as we come to the end of this insightful conversation, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to you, Ms. Ana Karen Flores, for sharing your expertise and shedding light on the complexities of women's incarceration as outlined in the 2023 Prison Policy Initiative report. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and continue making a positive impact in your corner of the world. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.